Something huge just happened at the Federal Reserve. It undercuts one of Donald Trump's biggest pressure points, and the Fed has brilliantly Trump-proofed itself for the inevitable departure of Fed Chairman Jerome Powell. Let me explain what happened and why it's so brilliant. It was done quietly, it was done unanimously, and it happened way earlier than anybody expected. In the last few days, the Federal Reserve reappointed 11 of its 12 regional bank presidents all at once. All right, so who cares? Why? Why does that matter? Well, they did it months before their terms were set to expire. Usually that's not the way it works. Normally these reappointments will happen right near the deadline. It's routine, it's boring, nobody pays attention. This time the Fed rushed it. They used a completely different timeline. Why does this matter? Trump is furious at the Fed. In particular, he's furious with Fed Chairman Jerome Powell because Trump wants interest rates cut faster and faster. Trump's been attacking Jerome Powell for years now. Trump's allies have been floating ways to reshape the Fed from the inside. This includes new requirements that would give Donald Trump even more control over the Federal Reserve, even though the Federal Reserve is not supposed to be under political control. As an example, Trump's Treasury Secretary floated a new rule saying Fed presidents should have to live in their districts for 3 years. Sounds like a mere technicality, but it's a way to kick a bunch of people out and replace them with the people you want. Trump's top economic advisor, the guy expected to replace Powell, backed the idea. So markets were starting to worry Trump is really going to take over the Fed and make it a political tool. What happens if Trump gets rid of Powell? What happens if Trump stacks the Fed with loyalists? Or what happens to Fed independence? That is the context. So now we get to the key part of this move. Those regional Fed presidents sit on the committee that sets interest rates. And one of the things I've told you, and I hope others have been telling you as well, is that just replacing Powell alone won't give Trump the control that he wants, because when the Fed meets to decide what are we doing with rates, are they going up, down, or staying the same, all of those regional Fed presidents get a vote. And in recent meetings, they, meaning these other Fed presidents, have been more resistant to rate cuts than the Trump-appointed governors. In other words, they are a problem for Trump even if he gets rid of Jerome Powell. So the Fed board stepped in and said, not so fast. And by reappointing these folks earlier than normal, the Fed has locked them in for another 5 years. Now, Trump can yell, Trump can threaten, Trump can get rid of Jerome Powell, but if the courts let him, by the way, but it won't matter nearly as much because now the structure underneath the Fed chairman has gotten way stronger. And one Fed official said this takes a huge risk off the table going into 2026. The good